am here with my friend and colleague, Michael Sonbert, and I am so grateful to have you in the Legacy Lounge, Michael. Thank you so much for making time for this and for our listeners. So, yeah, super great to have you here.
Oh
So,
my goodness. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
yeah, no, it's great. So, and Michael is a best-selling author, speaker, performance coach, educator, and the founder and CEO of Skyrocket Education, and newly launched Rebel Culture. And so he's turned his passion for educational reform into a global call to action for corporate leadership transformation. I love that vision, Michael. That's amazing. So, did you want
Well, I
to add
appreciate
anything
that.
to that?
Well, you pretty much summarized it, but for me, it's people. I know a lot of people who spend 33% of their lives working and they're really unfulfilled, and I think that that's
Mhm.
a ripoff. We're here for too short a time for
Yeah,
us to spend a third of our lives doing something that we're not fulfilled by. And like traditional coaching is like quit your job, and for me, it's like no, like
yeah,
let's make your boss be better at their job, right? And like your
yeah.
boss is more effective, you're happier where you are. So that's what we're
Awesome.
committed to.
Awesome. Well, in light of that and that big vision, the reason I had you on here is because I wanted to hear about your thoughts on legacy. So I would love to hear from you what legacy means to you.
When I think about legacy, I think about one thing really, which is my kids,
Uh,
and what they will take from what I hopefully teach them throughout my life. And when my mom died in 2001, and she was my favorite person in the world,
mm,
and we loved each other immensely. But when I reflect on our interactions, I don't know that she taught me a lot of things, at least not explicitly. And my dad is still with us, and I love him dearly. There's very little in my family of like, here's how you're supposed to operate, here's how you carry yourself, and here's
yeah.
what's important in life. And my both my wife and I are really intentional about doing that with our kids.
Mhm.
And so whether it's like what they learn from us intentionally, what they pick up through just osmosis or repetition, or even like the work that they see, myself and my wife doing on their birthdays, for instance. We tell friends and family not to bring gifts, but to bring food to donate to people who are in need of food, right? And so then after every birthday, we bring the food to the food bank, right? Because like we'll buy you all presents. You don't need 50 new toys, right? But like there
Yeah,
are people who could use food. And so, for me, when I'm gone, and I hope that's in a long time from now, but that
yeah,
my kids would be like, yeah, my dad taught me this. My dad always used to say this, like my dad
yeah,
XYZ, like, and that there would be something lasting there
yeah.
that doesn't exist now.
Yeah, casting a bigger vision around what our impact in the world as a result of our actions can play out, in other people's lives. That's really amazing. So, and you actually touched a little on my next question, which is like, what's your why story? Do you want to add a little more to that? Because you mentioned about your mom and the dynamic relationship that is there. And I think that lots of people can relate to that. And maybe even partly because that generation before there was more about like just let your actions show up, and so there isn't always
Yeah,
the
yeah.
oral share of story and what that looks like and how do you practically take those steps. It's like it should be something picked up, but we know that if you pair the action plus the teaching, it makes it far more accessible for people and for children especially, right?
Well, yeah, I mean it's great, and I think you're spot on with the previous generation. I think there was a lot of just kind of like, let's not say too much, let's not be too emotionally
Yeah,
available, but
yeah,
let's care about our kids immensely, and act in the ways that we will, and hope they pick some stuff up.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, in my 20s, I was, in my teens, I suffered from like crippling panic attacks. It led to me in my 20s to medicate with anything I could find. And I wasn't the best person in my 20s. And I call myself in hindsight, like I was a taker, right? I would take whatever I could get. Everything had to be about me. Every conversation had to be about me. Every interaction had to be about me. I didn't have a selfless bone in my body back then. I think that, so much of my why is around realizing that it's nothing's about me and that everything's about others. And how can I, in some way, add value to people who I know and people I don't know, and make others' lives better and different. So I became a teacher in South Philadelphia and saw the
Mm,
impact of my work on the children that we served at that school and in that district of schools. And the impact, there was actually really reciprocal, because they taught me, and they taught me as much as I taught them. But I started my first company, Skyrocket Education, and we work in urban school districts around the country. We like to say we're bringing educational justice to places where things aren't all that just. And
wow.
we usually
Yeah.
get in the Uber, and the Uber driver tells us we're going to the wrong place, because you couldn't possibly be wanting to go to that neighborhood in Baltimore or
Yeah.
Detroit or Chicago, Milwaukee, Philly, wherever it is. And for me, it's always been about, like, all right, well, how can we support people? How can we add value to people? How can we help people out if there's something that we can provide that they
Yeah.
need? And so my why is really about, like where can I make people better? Where can whatever I bring to the table help other people and make their days a little easier?
Hmm. So in light of your previous story, which was so transparent, and I so appreciate yeah, you being open like that. Um, how would you measure your happiness quotient as far as shifting from that place in your 20s to now, discovering that generosity and in being engaged in other people's lives shifts things so radically?
I wasn't happy back then at all. And despite what people people probably saw outwardly, I mean, I'm a musician too, and I wrote a lyric back then in my
Oh,
20s, which was, yeah. I wrote a lyric that said, "Being the life of the party will be the death of me." And
wow,
people,
that's powerful.
yeah, people at the time, I appreciate that. People at the time would say that I was, happy and fun, but inside I was just absolutely just miserable,
Oh,
just felt like I was dying inside. So, yeah, I mean, there's no comparison. It's like extreme happiness versus extreme misery.
that's amazing. So
Um,
that brings us to the
Thanks.
next couple questions. So I would love to hear a little more fully what you are doing now that you are hoping to impact this generation and the generation to come. And I know you touched on it as far as Skyrocket Education, but even if
Yeah.
you wanted to do that around rebel culture or whatever is on your heart and mind right now, as far as what feels like is the hope to shift things for this time and for future times.
There's a real correlation between, like, intentionality when it comes to like the way we're raising our kids, or at least attempting to,
Yeah.
and like modeling behaviors and repetition with a lot of the things that we coach leaders on, both at Skyrocket and Rebel Culture, to do, right? And to have a core set of values. What's the what here? What do we believe in this place? Do we operate in accordance with those things? And when we're off, are we comfortable saying,
Yeah.
like, hey, that doesn't actually jive with what we said here? And so what's the thing I'm trying to accomplish? What do I have to believe to get there? What do I have to do to get there? When I'm out of integrity on those pieces, do I can I get myself back in? I was talking to somebody earlier who has to have I'm coaching this leader to talk to their boss around the relationship that they have. Ideally, it's the boss who's coming to the person below them and saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, like, I want to," but that's not the case here. And
Yep.
the boss is sensitive and angry and yells and is unkind and not open to feedback. And what, like, this person, like, runs a company of a lot of people, and they're modeling that for everybody there. And what does that create? It creates infighting and frustration and
Yeah.
unpredictability. And so, my hope is that, the through the work we're doing in education, or in the corporate world, that we're able to show leaders, show people who just run any type of groups, or who are in some ways have some authority, that, like, hey, like, how you present yourself, like what you believe, what you say, like those things are immensely important. People are learning from you, even if you're not intending to teach them, and
Yeah.
you can improve somebody's experience by changing your behavior.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I would talk about that in the framework of what is the atmosphere that we create around ourselves,
Mhm.
and what
Yeah.
do people who are around us experience as a result of that atmosphere? And is it, like you said, in alignment with the values that we say? Are we producing behavior that aligns for the more that we actually want, you know? So yeah, no, that's
Right.
amazing, Michael. So last thing I would ask you is, what keeps you awake at night? What do you need to have change? And do you think it's possible to change? And it doesn't, I know that's a huge question. So it's like
Yeah.
whatever is on your mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that keeps me awake at night, and the thing I say pretty transparently to my team, particularly at Skyrocket, is that, 20 years from now, our work won't have had the impact that we want it to have. I mean, moving a machine like
Mm,
urban education is a monster task. And when you start to get two steps ahead, a new district initiative comes in, and everybody gets knocked back a few pegs, and you've got
mm.
to reorient yourself around that, and then you start to make progress, and then like, whoa, like pandemic, like then you
Yeah,
start to like backslide, and on the micro level, like start to make progress here, and then like two people resign or change jobs, and now you're starting back from square one, all while you know thousands and thousands and
yeah,
thousands of students are like getting a grade older every year. And so
yeah.
I know that our work is making a difference in the pockets where we are, but the thing that keeps me up at night is that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the same conversations will exist around the inequities and traditionally marginalized communities, and how kids from zip codes A, B, C, D are not getting the same advantages and the same education as kids in other zip codes. And that's a scary thought. It's part of what motivates me, to be honest, but it's definitely the thing I think about when I'm putting my head on the pillow.
Mm. Well, those are some heavy thoughts, and
Yeah.
shows your giant heart. I totally hear what you're saying, but know that I think that every time I think of like teachers that impacted me, and how that impacted me and how that gets passed on. And so those incremental steps still become, they still gather momentum. I am always inspired by your goals and how you
I
take
appreciate
strong
that.
action to move towards that. And so you wanting to see momentum and shift in that community is very understandable. So yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, just in closing, do you want to share how people could follow you or get in touch with you? And I was going to actually ask you to share just a little bit about your podcast that's launching in January too. So whatever your IG
Yes.
handle is, you can share that. And
Yeah, folks can find me. I think it's Michael.Carey.Sonbert. My middle name is Carey, Cary. But if you just Google me, if you Google Michael Sonbert,
okay,
you can find me on like social media. Our website is rebelculture.com. You can email me. Folks can email me at
awesome.
michael@rebelculture.com. And we have a podcast coming out. It launches on January 9th. It's called the Inspiration Accelerator. And what I've been fortunate enough to do is to talk to different inspiring people from across the world of like fitness and business and family and personal development, entrepreneurship. So it comes out on January 9th, and our hope is that folks throw it on and on their way to work, or when they're
Yeah.
out for a run, and they're like, man, I'm stories of regular people
Mm.
who are doing things that aren't regular. And I hope, and I think, and we're about 6 episodes in, and I'm getting goosebumps during most of the interviews.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm
awesome.
hoping that people hear it, and they're like, yeah, they're like, wow, like I could change the way I'm thinking about what my limits are and what's possible.
That's amazing. Well, thank you
I
so much,
appreciate that.
Michael, for being here today on the Legacy Lounge. I have so enjoyed even getting to know you further, and just your transparency and how you've shared everything. So thank you so much, and best wishes. Yeah, moving forward as you continue to step further into rebel culture and just shift. Yeah, transform leadership. That's awesome. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Sherry.